about this Q&A. I'm so privileged to be a part of this. This is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, one of the best directors ever, who has done some incredibly interesting and fun and classic work, from Gremlins to The Howling to Inner Space to The Burbs and so many more. We're going to get into all of that. This guy is one of my heroes, and I can't believe that we're going to be able to talk to this guy right now. Everybody, unbelievable. The great director, Joe Dante, is here. Joe Dante.
He likes to overpraise me.
I don't think so. Thank you so much for coming to Flashback. Your first time at this convention?
First time at this convention. I don't know how I missed it in 20 years, but I did.
Yeah.
And it's a really great convention because it's really well run. And I go to a lot of conventions, and some of them are not very well run, and people don't know where they're going. And this place, these people really have their stuff together.
Yeah. Do you like doing the conventions? Is it
yeah, because you get to meet the fans.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Let's go back to the beginning. You started as a film critic, as a film writer, were you always into movies from the time you were a young kid?
I was into movies. I was a Saturday matinee kid. I went to the Saturday matinee every Saturday, and then on Sunday I went to the Sunday matinee. One day I stayed on Sunday to see a double bill of World Without End, which is a time travel movie, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. And I had such a good time, I stayed to see them twice, which you could do with them in those days. And then by the time I got home, my parents had called the police. They didn't know where the hell I was. But it was a great afternoon. I'd do it again, except for the police part.
And what was it about the movies? You know,
there was something about my neighborhood theater. It was just a magical place for me. And I saw so many movies that really, meant a lot to me. And I saw 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I saw them. I saw This Island Earth and Forbidden Planet. I mean, I saw all these great movies when they were new. That's how old I am. But there was something irresistible about that theater.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could walk to it from home. I didn't need my parents to come and drop me off or anything. I got the movie bug.
Where'd you grow up?
Livingston, New Jersey.
Livingston, New Jersey. What was the theater? What was the name?
The Colony Theater.
The Colony. We had a colony here on the south side in Chicago.
Well, I have a colony in the Hamlet too.
Yeah.
Different kind of colony.
But so from that point on, now when did cartoons come into it? When did
the cartoons came when I went to the theater, because on Saturdays they would run 10 cartoons and 2 features. And when I was really little, I would stay for the 10 cartoons and I would leave when the feature came on because it was full of grown-ups. And I didn't understand grown-ups. I didn't understand them at all. And they were running adult movies like Executive Suite and stuff, and that didn't mean anything to me. But then one day I stayed. They were running at Cape from Outer Space. And I was kind of hooked. I thought, it's got adults in it, but still, it's pretty good. And then I just got in the habit, and I became a movie buff, I guess is the phrase.
And early, you started working with, you started editing first. You were a cutter first.
I edited trailers.
Trailers,
for Roger Corman at New World Pictures. But before that, my preparation for that of editing was that my friend John Davis and I had created a movie called The Movie Orgy, which was originally 7 hours long, and we bicycled it from theater to theater, and with all these different prints and all these pieces of film that we stuck together, and it became very unwieldy. So eventually we ended up cutting it down and buying the movies instead of renting them, and just buying them and cutting them up. I'm amazed to tell you that even after, this was in 1968, and then it went on from 68 to like 72 or something, because when I started working for Roger, I couldn't afford to do it anymore because I had to take the film physically to all these different campuses and run the film, which is very difficult because it was all splices. We call it a 2001 splice odyssey, because it was all different kinds of film all stuck together, and you had to change the focus, and you had to rate the sound, and it was exhausting just running it. So we would hire people to do it for us. But eventually the sprockets wore out because there was only the one print. all this stuff is just one print.
Amazing.
And it's playing all over the country. And finally we retired it. And then a number of years ago, I was in my vault and I said, oh geez, I wonder if this still runs. And I knew some people at the New Beverly Theater in Los Angeles, which is now owned by Quentin Tarantino. And I said, if I make a video of this, do you think you guys could run it? Because I didn't want to run the print; I probably wouldn't have made it. And they said yes, and it became this phenomenon. I had no idea. There were so many people who had seen this thing over the years and had talked to their friends about it that it became this sort of legend, the movie orgy. I sat through all 7 hours of the movie orgy. Because there's something about watching something for 7 hours. I mean, your brain freezes and it just drips out of your ears, and everything is funny. And so it's the funniest movie I ever saw. And it's 7 hours long. I mean, you know, geez, it's hard enough to sustain a comedy for 2 hours, but 7. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it was very popular. And this company called American Film Genre Film Archive, called me and said, you know, we'd like to distribute this thing if it's okay with you. And I said, well, you can distribute it, but you can't charge admission because I don't even know what half the stuff is, and most of it's copyrighted. They said, that's okay, we'll make that work. So they've been distributing this thing all around the country and around the world with no admission charge. You can donate to go in, but you can't charge admission. And it's been very successful to the point that they said, well, now we want to put it out on DVD or Blu-ray. And I said, well, you know, the whole thing about this experience is that it's an experience. It's not just a movie. It loses a whole dimension if you just watch it on a screen by yourself. But if you watch it with an audience, it becomes this audience participation thing, and it's much more memorable. And they said, well, yeah, but you know, people really they're asking for it, and they want to run it at home. And so I reluctantly gave in. And so apparently they're going to release this thing at the end of the year or beginning of next.
Is it going to be the full 7 hours?
No. Okay, the whole 7 hours is unreconstitutable.
I saw it, and it's something. It's amazing, actually.
It's definitely something. Exactly what? I don't know.
No, but you're right. It is about the experience. You know, I've talked to Patrick Bromley, who's one of the hosts here. Who's an amazing guy. He's a great guy. He's a huge fan of yours. He saw it in a theater. It wasn't a movie theater. Like somebody rented out a space, and it was like 100 degrees in the theater, and the seats were uncomfortable.
It's perfect.
Yeah. And he said he stayed. He's like, I'm not leaving. I'm watching this whole thing. There's no way I'm going to miss it. And
well, the whole idea was with all that with that kind of material, you know, and a lot of it's old movies, a lot of it's old TV shows, a lot of it's kid shows that people didn't even remember they'd seen when they were kids. That it was designed so that if you had go out and get a pizza and come back, you hadn't missed anything. Except that a lot of people say, well, what if the thing I like the most comes on while I'm out? And my answer was, see it the next time. You know? now they can just. I mean, it's a new age, you know. I mean, when I was growing up, if you missed a movie on TV, you had to wait another 5 months or maybe longer for it to be on TV again. Now everything is at our fingertips. I mean, we can stream, we can buy DVDs, we can buy discs, so we take it for granted how easy it is to see movies today, and it didn't used to be that easy. And it's amazing that so many of my generation became film nerds while watching movies cut up on TV with commercials, and hand and scan, but we still love them. And now it's a golden age for people who really love old movies because you have access to almost anything.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, if you missed a movie, a year later, maybe you'll be able to see it with the commercials. And I remember they showed like Alien on commercial television the first time, and they made up this terrible print ad and a catch. One of the greatest catchphrases in the history of cinema is "In space, no one can hear you." Right, and they put like, "When you don't know what to do," blah blah blah. And it was some stupid ABC Sunday night movie, and I'm thinking, and it was in a 2-hour time slot. And I'm thinking to myself, is it going to be 40 minutes long? It just doesn't make any sense. But that's how we watch movies.
That's how we watch movies.
Yeah, exactly. What was it like to work at New World for Corman? And I mean, so many, obviously we all know this, or a lot of people know this, incredible directors worked for Corman who went on to incredible historic success.
Yes, I was one of the lucky group of people who started with Roger Corman, and when I got to New World Pictures, Roger already had a reputation for nurturing people who went on to make mainstream movies like Peter Bogdanovich and Marty Scorsese and Francis Coppola, and so we knew we were in a great tradition. But of course, the movies that were being made at New World were a lot cheaper than the ones that were made in New York and International when Roger was at his height. And the subject matter was often women in cages, and lower than that. But nonetheless, we dutifully sold these things. And being in the trailer department, it meant you had to make the trailer for the movie, and you had to also make the TV spots. And the TV spots were much more important because that's where people really found out the movie was playing. You do a 60 and a 30. And they would saturate the airwaves in some podunk town when you opened the movie, because they didn't open the movies wide because they didn't have enough prints. So they would go from town to town and state to state. And so you blister the airwaves with these commercials. And then people would see the movie and they wouldn't like it very much, but by the time they could complain, the commercials were gone and the movie was out of the theaters. So, it was a great formula. But sometimes there just wasn't really enough good stuff in the movie, particularly the ones that were made in the Philippines, that you could sustain a really good trailer. So we started cheating, and so if we found a really good shot of something, we would stick it into a trailer for another movie that it wasn't in. And the most famous one is the exploding helicopter, which we got from a picture called The Cover Girl Models. They don't need clothes to strike a pose. It wasn't even a particularly good exploding helicopter, but it was an exploding helicopter. So whenever we were cutting a trailer for something that was kind of dull, if somebody shot a gun up in the air, we'd cut to the exploding helicopter. And then people would go see the movie, and they'd forgotten that they'd seen the TV spot the week before, and so we got away with it for years, And Roger took a lot of pride in the fact that he was recycling this one shot in all these trailers.
When you were cutting, clearly, I should probably use a microphone. When you were doing all that cutting and editing those things down, you're like, okay, this is going to lead me into
No, of course not. It was a job. I was thrilled to be in the movie business on any level. Nobody knew what we were doing. No, those movies never got reviewed. They didn't really, quote, exist. But you learned a lot from doing trailers because you had to cut like a 2-minute scene down to maybe 20 seconds. And when you do that, you have to analyze, okay, how many shots does it take to get this information across? And so later, you keep that in your head, and then when you go on the set and you're shooting and you know you have very little time, you know you don't need a reverse shot because you can cut to this. And then it changes what you decide to do on the set because you know what you can get away with. And so it was very educational. A lot of really good directors like Robert Wise started as editors because you just learned so much while you're editing.
Yeah, and you can always cut to the exploding helicopter.
Well, if you have one.
How did Hollywood Boulevard come? How did that happen?
Well, my first movie, Alan Arkish and I were the trailer department, and John Davison, who later produced Airplane and RoboCop, was the head of the publicity. And we all were making these trailers for these movies thinking, anybody could make a movie this good. We can make a movie this good. And so John went to Roger and said, well, if you let us make a movie for you, we'll make it the cheapest movie that's ever been made here at New World Pictures, and we're talking cheap. And Roger said that, okay, you can do that. You have $60,000 in 10 days, but you got to do the trailers at night. So we said, okay, because that's how much we wanted to be in the movie. And so we figured, how are we going to possibly, on that budget and schedule, make anything that people want to watch? And we realized we had this treasure trove of all these action scenes from all the movies we've been cutting trailers to. And so we said, how can we use all of these in one movie? Roger had been doing this series of 3-girl movies, teachers and nurses, and they get in trouble, take their clothes off, basically. And so we said, we'll do starlets. We'll do actresses, and we'll make it about a movie company making all these movies that we can use the clips from these things that we've got in our library. And we'll dress our actors up like the people in the clips, and we'll make a whole movie around this stock footage. And so we made a movie about, it's called Hollywood Boulevard. It's set at Miracle Pictures. If it's a good picture, it's a miracle. Which is an old joke that we stole from some cartoon from the 30s. And almost everything in the movie is stolen. And it's a rip-off of a Bela Lugosi movie called The Death Kiss, which is about murder in a movie theater, a movie lot. And so we went out and made this picture and had a lot of sex, and a lot of it's incredibly non-PC. It's got 2 comedy rapes in it, not often revived, but it was a movie, and we learned a tremendous amount doing it. And then it was back to doing trailers. We didn't exactly set the world on fire. But in fact, my brother went to see it on 42nd Street, and he said, "I've never been in a theater where they kept the lights on for the whole movie." Anyway, so we went back to doing trailers. But this time the trailers were a little better, as Roger was now distributing art films, and we got to meet Fellini and Truffaut and make trailers for their pictures. And Fellini said that my trailer for Amarcard was better than the trailer that he had done in Italy. So that was nice. But you never lose the itch once you've actually started making a movie. And so there were 2 projects that were on the hopper. One of them was Rock and Roll High School, and the other one was Piranha. And so Roger said to Al and I, "Well, I've got these 2 pictures, and if you guys think you want to do one, you could pick." Well, I thought Rock and Roll High School was a great idea for a movie. I thought Piranha was a terrible idea for a movie. Who's going to do a Jaws ripoff that many years after Jaws? But Alan was such a rock and roll fan, and he worked at the Fillmore East, and he lived and breathed rock and roll, and so he had to do the rock and roll movie. So I got the fish. And it turned out it actually worked out okay, because Piranha was made in Texas, where no one could find us. And John Sayles wrote the script, and it was far better than the script that they had started with. And it was a very challenging movie to make, but it was a lot of fun with really good actors in it. I thought of it as my first real movie, because it was my solo movie, because Alan and I had co-directed Hollywood Boulevard. On Hollywood Boulevard, I would set up a shot, and Alan would go and set up his shot. I'd shoot my shot, I'd say cut, he'd say action, then I'd set up my shot, and vice versa, except he didn't have any sound, because we didn't have enough money for 2 sound units. So he ended up doing all what we know as the second unit, and I did all the stuff with the actors. But it was a lot of fun. And Piranha worked out very well for me. It actually made a lot of money, particularly in South America, where they actually know what a piranha is.
And what you said it was a difficult shoot. What was difficult about Piranha?
Well, the difficult thing was that we didn't have the technology to make the piranhas was like impossible, and we ended up shooting at the Olympic swimming pool, USC, and with our jerry-built little piranha mechanisms, and we'd get up, we'd put on our wetsuits, go underwater, shoot the stuff, take them off, go to the lab. Didn't work. Go back and start doing it over. And let me tell you, a wetsuit. You don't want to put on a wetsuit and take off a wetsuit more than once a week, because it is so arduous. Putting it on is bad enough, but getting it off is horrible. I mean, it takes half an hour to get the damn thing off. And plus, I got an earache, and I thought this is no more fish movies for me. So of course, the first movie that I get offered is Jaws 3: People Zero.
Jaws 3: People Zero. How did that?
Well, that was a National Lampoon, Zanuck and Brown co-production. And this was going to be the sequel to Jaws 2. And because I had made Piranha, I was getting all these fish offers. Dino De just offered me Orca 2. I mean, I had all these fish, Barracuda. But I still had an earache from being in the pool. I didn't want to do any more underwater stuff. But Jaws 3: People Zero was written by John Hughes and Todd Carroll. It was made for National Lampoon, who were very irreverent. And Zanuck and Brown, of course, wanted to hold on to their Jaws franchise and not make fun of it. Well, how are you going to have National Lampoon making a Jaws movie and not make fun of it? So there was a lot of tension and a lot of service. And when I got there, they handed me my storyboards. They were already drawn. And I said, "What's this?" He said, "Oh, these are your storyboards. They're all eye level. They look like television storyboards." I said, "But I want to do my own story. No, it's a studio now. It's a big studio. It's the way we do things. Anyway, it didn't get made, which is probably a good thing. But while it was going under, my friend Mike Fennell called me from Afghan Embassy, where he was working on a movie called The Howling, and they were losing the director. And he said, "Do you want to do a werewolf movie?" And I said, and instead of a fish movie, yeah. And so I went to one of my, I thought, best friends who worked at Universal, and I said, "You got to tell me what's going on with this Jaws movie. Is this going to happen or not? I mean, these people are all fighting, they hate each other." He said, "I know I told you that, but always come to me if you have a problem, but I can't tell you anything." Big Hollywood lesson. Don't believe anything that they tell you. Because no matter how good their intentions, when it comes, it's like politics, you know, when it comes down to it, it's all about them. And so I said, "Chuck this," I just left, and I did The Howling instead, which I never regretted.
So, The Howling. I mean, there's a Howling reunion. Belinda's here, and Dee is here. It's such a great movie. I watched it again last week, and I hadn't seen it in a few years, and it's still great, funny, and beautifully made. Tell me about the experience on that. And one of the things I really love about The Howling, and there are many, but I love all the character actors that you got, the legendary guys that you got, and the fact that they get to act crazy and howl, and John Carradine is amazing in it.
I know. And listen, I love these people, and one of the great things about making movies, one of the great perks about making movies, which I used in Toronto too, because I had Keenan Wynn and Bradford Dillman and Barbara Steele and all these people that I liked before, and then it's an opportunity for me to work with people that I've seen on the screen growing up. And John Carradine had he had like 100 million credits before this movie, and he was kind of down on his luck financially, and he was doing almost anything that anybody handed him. And he was such a trooper, and he was always a threat, always there, always knew his lines. At one point things were really low. The generator blew out, and we were behind schedule, and I thought we were shooting by car headlights, which was one of the things Roger said. You don't need a generator; you can shoot by car headlights. Well, I thought that was ridiculous, except when it turned out to be true. We were shooting with car headlights. And I turned to John and I said, "Well, this isn't going to be the best picture you ever made, John." And he said, "Son, this isn't going to be the worst one either."
Slim Pickens. I just worship Slim Pickens.
Slim Pickens, great Kubrick stories. But the thing about this movie was that because it's making a low-budget movie is so fast, you don't really have a lot of time to hang out with the actors. So I started doing the slates so that I could be close to them for as long as possible and hear the stories. And then I'd do the slate. And then if I didn't finish the story, I'd have to do another take to hear the second half of the story.
That's fantastic. Dee, I did Dee Wallace's panel yesterday, and she said that with all of the movie, the cutaways to the films and the cartoons and things like that that are in the movie, that the studio you wouldn't pay for it, and you actually dished out the money to
well,
get.
Sometimes you do. I had to pay for Robbie the Robot to have him in Hollywood Boulevard. I had to come out of my own meager pocket, But I love Robbie the Robot. I want to have him in my movie, and I've had him in several movies, and I like to feel that I'm part of his career resurgence because he's had quite a bit of work since I put him in the movies.
Yes. 1981 was a pretty strong year for werewolf movies because in addition to The Howling, there was an American Werewolf in London and a Wolf in
Full Moon High.
And I'm sorry?
Full Moon High.
Full Moon High, yeah. Yeah.
Come on.
Good. So, but and at that time in the early '80s, suddenly the practical makeup effects thing became huge, and they became rock stars. Dick Smith had been doing it for many years, but then suddenly, like Rick Baker shows up, and you had Rob Bottin, and for my money, Rob Bottin. The effects, like specifically in all of the movies they did, but specifically in The Thing, to this day, those practical effects are unbelievable. What was it like to work on? Because I love I love all the stuff, but the transformation sequence in The Howling is particularly
Rick
awesome.
was supposed to do The Howling.
Yeah.
When we started putting together, we went to Rick, of course, and he said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do a werewolf movie. John Landis and I were going to do a werewolf movie. It never happened, so I'm going to do yours." So Landis heard about this, and he calls up Rick and he said, "I've got the money." And I don't know how he did it. "I've got the money." Maybe he only said he had the money. But he eventually had the money, and Rick said, I promised him I can't do this. And Rick was, Rob was his second in command. And he said, I think I'm going to leave this for Rob to do. And Rob stepped up on not much notice to do amazing work on very little money. I mean, very little money. With techniques that, he and Rick had already talked about. It turned out to be such a big deal in the movie, these transformation scenes, that when AFCA was trying to sell the movie to the exhibitors, they took the transformation scene, Bob Picardo's transformation scene, and they ran it for the exhibitors, and the exhibitors said, oh great, we'll all book this, we think this is great. So then they came back and said, don't cut that scene. And I said, what do you mean don't cut that scene? It's just a rough cut. I said, no, don't, just leave it the way it is. Don't change anything. The exhibitors love it. So to this day, it's a wonderful scene, but it's too long. I'm sorry, it's too long. Poor Dee is sitting there staring at this thing happening.
I do want to mention some of the regular players that you would have in your movies. And speaking of that transformation sequence in particular, Robert Picardo, that guy, I mean, he's unbelievable. And of course, Dick Miller. That guy was a legend. I love the fact that, speaking of Dick Miller, we can get to this in a second, but I love the fact that, like, Dick Miller, I thought he died in Gremlins, and then you bring him back. And it's,
no, if you listen hard, at the end of Gremlins, the announcer on TV is saying that Murray Futterman is being interviewed in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
It's probably got buried, but it's in there.
Okay, but I just thought, okay, to bring in Dick Miller, but he was fine, too. He came in,
Yeah.
But I want to get to Gremlins, too, in a second here, but those stock people, those great,
Well, all directors have their stock company.
Yeah.
I mean, you see...
Belinda, too, is another one.
Yeah, you see John Ford movies, you see Preston Sturges movies, you see, Ingmar Bergman movies. They all have the same actors appear all the time. And it's because once you've worked with an actor and you get along and you understand each other, you don't need to do any directing. You can cast the movie and go, I know exactly what I'm going to get, because I know exactly what this person is capable of. And so there's a whole lot of people in my movies who keep reappearing all the time, and it's because A, I like them, and B, I like to watch them work, and C, they're always the right person for the part.
Yeah. So after The Howling, Twilight Zone, so you and I were talking about this in the part of the VIP party the other night, last night. Well, I'm dropping names. Hey, we're at a VIP party.
Who was at a VIP party?
Yeah, why? But I remember seeing Twilight Zone, and I was not a real big fan of the Landis episode. I was not a really big fan of the Spielberg episode, but the last two, my God. And it was great, too, because like at that point, Landis was really established by that point. Obviously, Spielberg was. And you guys, not so much.
Yeah.
And you came in and you kicked their asses across the film.
Well, it was very good for George and me because we got the best reviews, and it was a career boost. It really was.
Yeah. What was it? What was it like?
Well, I was already working on Gremlins before I was asked to do the Twilight Zone.
Oh, you were working on Gremlins before?
I was in a long gestation period. It was designed, and said, how are we going to do it? So I was working on pre-production, and then when I found out they were doing the Twilight Zone movie, John and Stephen asked me to do an episode, and then while I was in the meeting, George Miller was visiting, and they said, "Oh, there's George Miller. Let's have him do an episode." So it was very ad hoc,
Really? That's not...
Yeah. And the original idea in the movie was that all the characters from the different stories were going to intersect with each other in the other stories, and of course, during the Landis shoot, which was separate from the rest of the movie, there was this terrible accident, and so. They had to scratch that idea. They couldn't do it, and then they changed. Stephen changed the movie. He was going to do Kick the Can, which was Kids at Night, and he didn't want to do that. So they ended up doing it was a remake. What was it called?
I can't remember the name, but
it was a remake of something with kids in an orphanage or something. I don't know. Anyway. But George and I were kind of pretty much left alone by the studio because this is sort of a hot potato now. It's been in the news and everything, but they still wanted to make the movie. So we got to make our first studio movies with no interference at all from the studio, which meant that we could do anything we wanted. We thought, this is great. They hire you to make studio movies. They give you all this money and all this expertise, and they leave you alone. This is wonderful. No wonder we love movies. Then we made our next movies for the same company, and it wasn't quite the same.
Gremlins, everybody. I mean, massive hit. Did it change? I mean, were you getting offers all over the place after?
I would have been on the cover of Time magazine if the Falkland Islands hadn't happened.
Damn it!
Yeah, I know.
Tell me about working on Gremlins and
well, it was difficult because the studio was doing it as a favor to Steven. He wanted, it was his first Amblin production, and they wanted to make him happy, as they always do. So he had this movie, and it wasn't going to cost that much, and he figured, And they used to refer to it as Spielberg's folly. So there wasn't really a lot of support from the studio, and they were very cynical about it, and they thought it was going to be junky, and it was a difficult picture to make because we didn't have the technology; we had to make it up, and the tone was very odd, which is something I've gotten my whole career. It's like, what's he doing? I mean, on the first day's dailies of The Howling, the head of the company said, "Is this a horror picture or a comedy?"
Yeah.
And I get that all the time because they're very close. They're very aligned, these two genres. But anyway, we muddled through, and it turned out to be at the sneak preview. It was an immense hit. I mean, people were on the ceiling. There was no publicity. There were no stars. Nobody knew what it was going to be. It was in San Diego, I think, and it was the greatest sneak preview I've ever been at, and yet after it was over, they were all excited and high-fiving themselves of how brilliant they had been to hire us to make this picture. And the one thing is, the one thing we got to do though, we got to cut out that story that Phoebe Cates tells about her father. Once you get rid of that, you're going to have a big hit.
Did you have to fight to keep it in?
I had to fight to get it in.
Yeah. Well, thank God. I mean, it's one of the most legendary.
I know. They didn't get it, but they didn't understand the whole movie, so it didn't really make much sense.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Gremlins 2, because as much as I love Gremlins, Gremlins 2 is one of the greatest movies ever made. Listen, it's batshit crazy, and I loved every frame of it, and I just laughed the entire time, like a Looney Tunes cartoon come to life, like with real actors in it. The jokes were sketchy, they were all over the place. I adore that movie, and it was funny, on Friday night when you were up here with Sven, and he was asking you, you were talking about how Bride of Frankenstein, you mentioned that Bride of Frankenstein was kind of like James Whale's Gremlins 2.
Because he didn't want to make it. And
exactly.
And they came to him and said, we'll give you this, we'll let you do whatever you want if you make a sequel. And okay, so that's what happened to me. I mean, they tried to make a sequel to Gremlins for years. But when you try to make a sequel to a movie you don't like or understand, it makes it very difficult. And so they had Gremlins go to Mars, Gremlins go to Las Vegas. I mean, they hired these writers and they paid a lot of money for these scripts that were terrible. And finally they just gave up and they came back and, Dante must have had something to do with this. So they came back and said, if you'll give us another Gremlins movie this summer, we'll let you do whatever you want. And never before or since have I ever had an offer like that. And they were true to their word. They actually let me get away with Gremlins 2, which is pretty much the way I look at it. Because to me, it was a reason why, it was a movie about why there shouldn't be a sequel to Gremlins.
That's exactly. That's my favorite explanation of the movie. It's the explanation as to why there shouldn't be a sequel to Gremlins. I love it. I remember seeing it, and I believe I told you this. I saw it in Times Square. When it came out, with a packed house.
Everything's better in Times Square.
Especially in 1990. And it was still kind of filthy and creepy then in 1990. And I saw it with a packed house, and I'm telling you, it played like gangbusters, like everything. People were like going crazy, and like just all the goofy stuff that's in that movie. The bit with Hulk Hogan, where the film breaks. Did that play well?
That was a little controversial.
Yeah, explain.
Well, they were. I have to be fair. They let me get away with anything that I wanted to do, pretty much, except they wouldn't let me call it Gremlins 2 People Nothing. And they really took umbrage at this film break gag because they said, "Well, if they think the film's broken, they'll all leave." I said, they paid to get in, you know? They're sitting in the theater. It's going to be a couple of seconds, and then they're going to think the film's broken, and they're going to look up at the booth and wonder what's going on, and then they're going to see it's gremlins, and they're going to realize it's a joke. I said, So we went to the preview, and of course, and they said, let's preview it. So they previewed it, and of course it was the biggest laugh in the picture, and I couldn't cut it out. And so then when we sold it to TV, there was, I realized the film break gag wasn't going to work, so I said, well, if you give me a couple more bucks, we can do a VCR gag. So we shot a couple of more things with the gremlins as if they attach your VCR and switch channels. And then instead of Hulk Hogan coming and chasing them away, John Wayne comes and chasing them away, which is a good trick because John Wayne had been dead for a number of years. But we called his son and we said, who does the best imitation of your dad? And he said, Chad Everett. And so we brought in Chad Everett and he did John Wayne's voice. And it was a lot of fun. I think that version is only available as an extra on the Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's true. It is. I also people be confused. Wait a minute, I didn't see Paul Bartel on the way in. What, he didn't tear my ticket. This is not real. And again, I loved everything about Gremlins too. The movie you made before is also one of my favorites. But it was that's the Burbs, which you knew that.
My second most popular picture.
I'm sorry?
My second most popular picture.
Is it really?
Pretty much.
Yeah. That was actually, was that shot during the strike?
It was shot during a strike at Universal, and there was nobody else shooting except us. And if you listen really hard, you can hear the Jaws ride in the background. What was interesting was that because there was a writer's strike, I like to have the writer on the set whenever possible because it's just better when the writer's there and people have a question about something, a character or a line, and the writer's there. It's great. You can't afford to do that all the time, but I did. I flew John in Sales down to Texas to be in Piranha for that reason, because I wanted to have a writer around. So I always try to have the writer in the picture somewhere. And in this case, we couldn't do that. So although he is in the movie as an actor. So I said, look, why don't we do this? Why don't we're never leaving this cul-de-sac. We're only in this one set. Why don't we shoot it in sequence? And that way, if people have an improv or they want to go somewhere with this story, they can do it. Because in a movie where people do a lot of improv, sometimes the improvs don't match what's already been shot. And so they get, in New York is an example of a movie where the improvs don't quite match some of the things that have previously happened. But in this movie, the improvs were integral to the story. And so it's kind of a behavioral movie. The story isn't that strong, but the characters are really great. And because of the way they're inhabited by these actors, I mean, they really have a lock on them. And it's some of the funniest lines in the movie are complete ad-libs that were only done once, and they're still in the movie. So it's such a popular movie. I mean, it's so quoted. People just love it.
They're the goddamn brownies. And those guys are so funny. I mean, Hanks and Dukeman and Bruce Dern. God, that stuff is hilarious. What I loved about it is that it's just like this sort of like dark look at suburbia. You know, like we don't know who these people are next to us. They're completely murderers.
Well, but this appealed to me because I found, even when making the movie and asking the crew, almost everybody had a story where at one point in their lives they lived in a neighborhood where people said, that house, don't go there. Those people are nuts. And there's always a house where somebody crazy is supposed to live there. And it's not just on Halloween that you find that out. I mean, they just don't go over there. And I think that sort of hit a nerve with people because I think a lot of people identified with the fact that, there's some weird neighbors on my street. So I guess it's easy to identify with.
There are so many great moments. I mean, I could go through the whole list of reasons why I laugh my ass off every time I watch that movie. But I just have to ask, what was it like to work with Brother Theodore? For people who don't know who Brother Theodore is.
Brother Theodore was a trip. I'd seen him for years on the Letterman show, and he had a show that he did at midnight in New York. He was a fixture of New York theater. And Theodore Gottlieb was his real name. And he was quite elderly, and he was deaf as a post. And so in the rehearsals, the actors would have to shout their lines in any scene that he was in order for him to pick up his cue. But he was a very funny guy, a very warm guy. And of course, because we didn't have a lot of time to spend with him, we had a minder, you know, a kid who's like, your job is to make sure that Theodore gets everything he wants. And he and Corey Feldman didn't get along particularly well. And so there's a scene where he screams at Corey Feldman and calls him a sub-moron, which is all ad-libbed.
It's just great. It's just inspired. I mean, that movie, it's one of my favorites of all time. And there's so many funny things in your movies, obviously. You have a really fun, weird, twisted sense of humor.
It's a Mad Magazine sense of humor. I was brought up on Mad Magazine. That's why there's so many little gags in the background and, you know, jokes that maybe you won't get until you see the picture the second time. And, you know, I have to see these pictures like a lot of times. And so I try to put as many things in there as possible just to keep me going while I'm doing the dub.
I remember when I first got my radio show, one of my first guests, and I was really nervous. It was just over the phone. One of my first guests was Dick DiBartolo. And I remember just like shaking. I'm like, oh my God, this is Dick DiBartolo, a major writer for Mad. And he also like helped create Match Game. Like he wrote all the, and I'm like, this guy's one of my heroes. And I remember like really like early in my radio career.
You must have had too much money to go on your show.
Yeah, it's true. He was slumming big time for that. Comedy, and I do want to talk about some of the comedy stuff that you've done. We have, let's Amazon Women on the Moon.
Well, Amazon Women on the Moon was a follow-up to Kentucky Fried Movie that John Locke was just going to do. And and there was a whole series of movies like Tunnel Vision. There were sketch movies, basically. Groove Tube. And Amazon Woman was based on the idea, it was sort of a movie orgy kind of an idea. It was as if you're watching TV and changing channels. And so John and I and some other folks, Carl Gottlieb and some other people, I was given a script by these two guys, Barry and Mulholland, who wrote a lot for Letterman. And there was a lot of parody stuff in it, and there was a really good one called The New Invisible Man, where the Invisible Man is naked, and he can be seen, but he doesn't know that. And I thought, boy, I'd really love to do that, but Carl Gottlieb got that one. But the one that really appealed to me, although I did one that I liked with Carrie Fisher called Reckless Youth, which is a parody of VD movies, which Landis hated and put in the middle of the end credits. But there was one called Roast Your Loved One. Where the idea is that a funeral service decides to offer a perk to people who died, and if for an extra couple of bucks, they will put you on a dais with a bunch of comedians, and they'll roast the guy like it's a Dean Martin roast. And so in my story, Bob Picardo is the funeral director, and he sets this thing up. And Archie Hahn who's been in so many of my movies and got cut out of almost all of them. And it was one of my favorite actors, but I always put him in roles that end up getting cut. Anyway, he plays this guy who dies while watching television, and he ends up having a funeral, and there's a dais of famous comedians who come out, and just like it's a TV show. And at the end, they make the widow get up and do a bit. And she turns out to be funnier than the comedians. And it's in terrible taste. But it has all these great comedians, Steve Allen and Slappy White and Reb Taylor. And, it was just so much fun having those guys on the set. It was one of the most fun things I ever did. And it's really funny when you watch it. And Belinda, who plays the bereaved widow, was very trepidatious about going up and doing this stuff with these big comedians. But it turned out that she really got into it, and they started encouraging her. And I think it's the best performance she ever gave.
And because we're running a little bit short, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Matinee. Matinee, it's a beautiful movie, man, and it's a movie that I think personally we need like now. Like it's one of those films that if there's unexplainable tension or weirdness in the world, and you want to escape and watch a really lovely film, I love Matinee, and obviously William Castle was the inspiration.
It's a Valentine to movies in general.
Yeah.
And also, the lead character is based on sort of on William Castle, but also on Roger Corman, and also based on Ray Dennis Steckler, and a bunch of those guys who took their films around in tents sometimes with interactive stuff. But the Castle stuff was particularly good because he actually did it all. He actually did put the buzzers under the seats. He did put the skeletons flying over the theater, and he loved doing it. And so a lot of that enthusiasm comes through in John Goodwin's performance. And it's set during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when I was one of the kids, the age of the kids in the movie, who thought that there was no school on Monday or Tuesday or ever because the world was going to end that weekend. And it's hard to explain, if you weren't there, how seriously we all thought the world was going to end. I mean, it was taken for granted that this was it. This was the end. And I think we capture a lot of that in the film. But it does it's a very accurate rendition of that period.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie, and it captures that time period. I mean, I wasn't alive during that time period, but it really is a love letter to films in general. And also, I do want to mention Looney Tunes back in action. Yeah. For those of us, who thought that the Michael Jordan movie Space Jam was crap. Thank you.
Well, the problem is it was a Michael Jordan movie and not a Bugs Bunny movie.
That's exactly right. Tell me about Looney Tunes back in action. And was that? I mean, because you've been influenced by Looney Tunes all over the place.
Well, Chuck Jones was a friend of mine, and that's why he's been on a couple of pictures of mine. He hated Space Jam, and he felt that they were shitting on the characters.
Yeah.
And having them do things that they wouldn't do, in the service of a movie about a basketball player. So when this other project came along, which they were trying to make Space Jam 2, and they were going to do it with Jackie Chan, and they were going to do Spy Jam, right? And it was a whole bunch of ideas for how to do it. And I got the script, which frankly wasn't very good, but it looked like this movie was going to get made, and it was definitely a Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck movie. And I knew that Chuck would want somebody who cared about these characters to make the movie and to preserve the way that they actually act and not have them doing hip-hop all the time. And so I agreed to do the movie, which is extremely difficult to do because the marketing people wanted to make the movie because they wanted to get the cartoon characters out there again because they had been off TV for a while, which didn't help. But the people who ran the studio didn't like cartoons, didn't like the idea of making the movie, and yet felt impelled to tell me how to do it. And so I said at one point, I said, why are you guys telling me how to make a movie you wouldn't walk across that street to see? And I said, because it's our studio and you work for us. Well, what do you do with that? So anyway, we hired as many talented people as we could. We made the best of what we could do out of it. And I think that although it's a little louder and more raucous than I would have liked, it's a pretty good representation of my view of Looney Tunes and how it fits into the world. Unfortunately, the rest of the world didn't think so. And so it put the kibosh on any more Looney Tunes for quite a while, because it was such a spectacular disaster, and it cost so much money that we were throwing money at it like it was unbelievable. I mean, there was this, you wouldn't believe how much money was spent on things that didn't end up in the movie. So it was just sort of a bad thing all around. But now there are two good Looney Tunes movies: The Day the Earth Blew Up, and Coyote versus Acme, which is now coming out after being put on the shelf by these same people who think that it's a much better idea to make a movie and put it on the shelf and take the tax write-off than it is to actually release it and let the people who worked on the movie make some money.
Isn't that unbelievable? That's unbelievable.
It's corporate is what it is.
So really quickly, when we were talking about Matinee, I forgot to mention Mant, which is maybe the greatest fake movie of all.
Half man, half ant, all terror.
All terror. Where did Mant?
Well, Mant was always in the script.
Yeah.
Even with the first writer put it in the script, and then the second writer made it better. But there's two ways to do a parody of a 50s science fiction movie. One is to make it really crappy, and then have people say, look how crappy those movies were. And there's another way to do it where you try to make it as good as it would have been in 1962 or whenever it was made. So Mant is, except for the screenplay, which is ridiculous, the special effects and stuff and the way it's shot are pretty state-of-the-art for a studio movie for that period. And we didn't want to have a movie where you see the strings on the puppets and all that kind of stuff. We wanted to show it through the eyes of the kids who watch these things. When I went to see Tarantula, I thought I was looking at a giant spider walking down the street. And I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that that's what I was looking at. And I didn't want to make my child heroes into dummies and having them enjoying a movie that the audience thinks these kids are idiots if they like this kind of stuff. And so by making it funny and hiring some really good actors to be in it, and by stealing a lot from Burt Gordon, whose specialty was when writing down to children, he would do a big word and they would have the guy explain it in the same sentence. So it's like he has accelerated or speeded up growth. And so there's a character played by Robert Cornthwaite, who was the scientist in the original thing, who was a brilliant actor and who just nails this stuff and makes it just so funny and so believable. And it was shooting Mant was one of the most fun things I ever did.
That's great. And then really quickly, there's a new Naked Gun movie out right now. But I want to mention, he directed 2 episodes of Police Squad, which is the brilliant TV series that the movies were based on. And those 6 episodes are funnier than any of the movies, in my opinion. You directed 2 of the funniest episodes.
I directed that show. It was not a success because of 2 reasons. One, the studio kept moving, the station kept moving it around. Nobody knew where to find it. 2, it had no laugh track. And it looked so perfectly like a 1960s cop movie with Leslie Nielsen, who was in 1960s cop shows, that people went, oh, Leslie Nielsen. And they didn't stick around long enough to see that it was funny. And believe me, the 6 episodes of Police Squad are actually much funnier than any of the Naked Gun movies because they're so perfect parodies of television with the freeze frames and the title, the different titles and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they're just so funny, and they're available now. I mean, I recommend them
highly. And the 2 that you directed, the stand-up comedy one and the boxing one, brilliant, man. Like really, really brilliant. Listen, I can't tell you what a great honor it has been to talk to you.
Don't tell me.
Okay. Joe Dante, everybody. Okay, everybody, stick around.